Hello to everyone gathered today for the Alliance of Minnesota Chinese Organizations Stop the Hate Forum. I wish I could be with you in person, but we're all doing everything virtually for just a little bit more. And I wanted to be with you to tell you how important it is to address this alarming rise in attacks against the Asian American community. I've been talking about this for a while, even asking the FBI director about it a year ago. And I want to recognize Bingwen Yan, the president of AMCO, and all of the local leaders participating in today's forum. Thank you for having the generosity of spirit to bring your community together, and also to not hide. Because if we just pretend this isn't happening, it's just going to get worse. We all have to confront it together. The attack in Georgia was horrifying and heartbreaking. 6 of the 8 victims were women of Asian descent, and all must never be forgotten. That's why I always like to make sure we say people's names. Dao Yo Feng, Hai Yung Jun Grant, Su Chung Kim, Soon Chung Park, Shao Jae Tan, Young Ah-yu, Delana Young, and Paul Andre Michaels. Well, there is still a lot we don't know. It's clear that this attack followed a year of increasing harassment and violence against your community. And these violent attacks inflict fear not just on the victims, but on all the communities across the country, including right here in Minnesota. We've seen these attacks on members of Asian American communities occurring where they work and where they live. Attacks at work threaten both a person's economic livelihood and sense of security and safety. Attacks at home threaten the very foundation of family life, where you're supposed to always feel protected and secure, surrounded by neighbors who look out for your well-being and your kids' well-being. Here's one story that I recently heard when I met with members of your community. Gloria Wong is a resident of St. Paul who came to Minnesota as a refugee from Laos in 1980. After over 4 decades of hard work and determination, she is now the co-owner of Century Plaza. But this year has been hard for her and so many other Asian American, including Chinese American business owners who were hurt economically because of the pandemic and emotionally because of the rise in racism and racially motivated violence. Gloria has faced the challenge of trying to keep her business afloat, and I'm sure many of you have done the same during the pandemic. But repeated harassment has made a difficult situation much, much worse. Century Plaza, her business, was vandalized with hateful rhetoric, and she and her family have been falsely accused of spreading the coronavirus. Friends of mine who are Asian American have had the same thing happen to them. People not sitting next to them, people calling them names. It is sometimes, yes, physical violence, but it's also words. In St. Cloud, Ray Wong Molnar and her husband Gregory have also suffered the terrible consequences of racially motivated violence. In their case, it was directed at their home. Ray and Gregory retired and moved to St. Cloud in November 2016. They didn't know too many of their neighbors at first, but over the years, people would stop in front of Ray's house to comment on her talent for gardening and landscaping as she worked in her yard. But suddenly, after 5 years of being part of the fabric of the community, Ray was terrorized in her home during 4 separate incidents in March. The first time, she was in her dining room knitting a shawl in the evening when she heard what sounded like rocks hitting the glass door. Her husband called the police, and they found holes made by pellets from a gas-powered automatic BB gun. On 3 other nights, someone had fired a BB gun at the windows of their home. Again, they called the police. Again, more pellet holes. Twice they have seen cars driving away after sounds of the shots. Now they're afraid to sleep. They stay awake to watch in fear of each car that passes. These people are not alone. There have been more than 40 documented incidents of anti-Asian bias in our state over the past year. And that's just the number that are reported. I think you all know something that has happened. Maybe it didn't rise to the level of shots and pallets or or hateful rhetoric written on a door, but it still hurts. What people have endured is not normal and it's not right. These are hate crimes, and it's time for us to stand together to denounce hate and take action. When I was county attorney, I made prosecuting hate crimes a priority. I saw firsthand the terrible trauma that these crimes can inflict, not just on victims, but on entire communities. In the Senate, I supported legislation to expand the federal hate crimes law during my first term, and I've worked to provide additional grant funding to safeguard community centers and religious institutions in the face of rising threats of violence. I've worked with Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska on a bipartisan bill to ensure that prosecutors can successfully enforce the federal hate crimes law. And I also am part of Senator Hirono's legislation to require the Department of Justice to invest the resources needed to fully investigate pandemic-related hate crimes against Asian Americans. But it will also take leadership from the top of our government, which is why I'm glad that President Biden reconvened the Justice Department Hate Crimes Enforcement and Prevention Initiative to address the rise of hate crimes against the Asian American community and to improve coordination across federal agencies to combat bias and violence, particularly at the intersection of anti-Asian bias and violence against women. I think you know there's a lot of other things we can do here. We've got to make sure the Asian American community gets vaccinated. We need to make sure their small businesses stay afloat because you have been such a fabric part of our life. I think of all these amazing celebrations that I've been part of with all of you, celebrating your holidays, celebrating your New Year's, celebrating your family's lives. Now we've got to have your back in a big way. To live up to our values, we must do everything in our power to combat hatred and violence fueled by bigotry. And while organizations like AMCO are working to elevate these issues and offer support to Asian American communities, as a key member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I will be your partner in Washington, combating this alarming rise in attacks on people of Asian descent. Let's get to work. Thanks for allowing me to say a few words.